What's up, everybody? Hoang Zero here, and today we are here to deliver the BT12 tier list. I'm joined today by Zero, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, it's Zero.
Alright, and so to kick it off, we're going to go straight into what is going to be the best deck in the entire format, or, so we're predicting, Beelzemon, just off the bat. And the reason why we're going to do this, and I know it's a little bit unorthodox from what we normally do, but the reason why we're starting off with Beelzemon is because, well, the entire format is centered around it, right? Like, either your deck beats it, or your deck doesn't beat it. Does your deck get manhandled by it, or does your deck, kind of walk away okay, So depending on how your Beelzemon matchup goes, your placement is very, very, decided based on that. So the reasons why Beelzemon is such an an insane deck is, number one, it got access to Beelzemon X. And for those of you that do not know, Beelzemon X is on Digivolve. For every 10 cards in your trash, burn the top of your opponent's security. So with starter deck Beelzemon, what you can go ahead and do is you can go Warp Imp, for example, and then Warp, Evo, Beelzemon from starter deck, swing for 2, and then Evo into Beelzemon X, burn 2, and then if you have Blast Mode, you can restand and swing again. That alone is 5 damage, so if your opponent was at 4 security from an earlier chip, for example, which is not super hard, that's game. That's just straight up lethal. And you're burning 2, so you're nullifying a lot of their security potential. And that's, obviously not taking into account the rest of the deck, because the rest of the deck is also just super insane. And you're like, okay, but getting 20 or 30 in trash is a lot to ask for, right? And the reality is it's really not. Everything you do kind of just mills 3. So
You get it by turn 3 fairly often.
Yeah,
I've talked to so many people who play this deck, and a lot of people who've been testing Beelzemon. Deck is just really powerful.
Yeah.
Not only is the Beelzemon tri deck very powerful, has a lot of powerful cards in it, and on top of that, Beelzemon X itself is a very insane card. The card basically read your opponent's start at 3 security.
Yeah.
A lot of times, because getting to 20 in trash with this deck is almost trivial in terms of how quickly you can get there.
Yeah, so it's just, and not only that, but it also has access to a lot of removal. It runs on average about 9 security bombs, being 4 Death Slingers, 4 Rivals Barrage, and then the 1 7th Cluster. Some lists will go ahead and run 2 7th Clusters as well, so whenever they evolve into that Beelzemon X, they are going to be popping 2. That also helps a lot with trying to keep themselves from decking out, between that and Mako and a couple of other things, like Wizardmon, for example. So there's just a lot of fuel to this deck. It just does a lot. It can hit really high numbers because a lot of its DP inheritables give DP, and it's just very consistent. You're hitting 20 in trash very consistently, which is really terrifying. So yeah, Beelzemon's probably PIF.
I think the misconception people have with this deck is they think this deck needs to high roll to do stuff.
You don't.
It doesn't need to high roll. The average of this deck is already really strong. And then on top of that, you have the ability to high roll your opponent out of the game with your RNG milling. So it's a very good deck normally that has the ability to high roll even further. So it's not one of those decks that's just you need to high roll to do well. No, this deck is nutty on average. And then sometimes they hit. I've seen people hit double imp off a mill and just completely go off from that imp. And from the double imp and gain 4 memory, and hit 20 in turn 2.
I think another to put it it's just very flat out there. On average, you're consistently hitting the kill turn on turn 3, or you're at least putting them to 0 on turn 3 at the bare minimum. If you high roll, they're dead on turn 2. That is the reality of it. And I don't think this deck is in particular very difficult to pilot as well. The new support it gets in BT12 streamlines a lot of their combos. Beelzemon X is kind of just a mistake of a card, it feels like, and so I definitely do think. Go on.
I disagree with the notion.
Okay.
Not that Beelzemon is a mistake. I think Beelzemon X is definitely a
mistake.
Right, but I think the deck does have quite a bit of pilot gap.
Okay.
You're gonna see. I think this might be a kind of deck that has a lot of varying opinion in the community, because I do think there is while I don't believe the deck to be extremely difficult to pilot, because like you said, a lot of the plays are very streamlined, but there's a lot because each turn involves so many micro decisions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of optimization you can do, and there's a lot of knowledge check with the deck that you have that allow you to bring it to like the next level. If you see like an average Beelzemon player versus like a really good Beelzemon player like Tesoro play this deck, they will sometimes find plays from like an impossible situation.
Yeah.
I've had a scenario where I've set up floodgates, a number of things. I'm just like, okay, there's no way he can kill me from this position, and then he finds like a high roll that was able to kill me from that position because he actually went for it. So I do think this deck does have a high skill ceiling that will reward very good play.
And so let me correct my statement. I think this deck, the floor is way too high and the ceiling is even higher. Like, I think there is a gap between a good Beelzemon player and like an average one, but even an average Beelzemon player playing this deck is probably going to be like, for the most part, for most people, it'll be difficult just because like that's how strong this deck is. So yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, okay, so going on next, we do have Hunters. Hunters is a deck that could be 100% built from BT12. You don't need any pre-existing support for this deck, actually, unless you want to run like some quirky techs, like, I don't know, like Death X or something like that. But if you just play pure Hunters, you can build the entire deck from BT12, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's also super budget.
Yeah,
I think the deck is like $20.
Yeah, it's super cheap. The most expensive card is probably going to be Quartzmon, but Quartzmon's a super rare, thankfully. And so how I look at Hunters is that any deck that even potentially had a chance of beating Beelzemon, it loses to Hunters. Because generally speaking, decks that can beat Beelzemon are decks that can ignore Beelzemon's popping potential, or can hardwall it out, right? And Hunters is the one deck in the format that has the ability to just ignore that, and they just go ahead, tuck away your big stack. So Hunters to me is just Beelzemon's dog on a leash, where it's just, if Beelzemon's going to lose to a matchup, Hunters will make sure that matchup no longer exists in the format. But that being said, Hunters is still a very, very good deck in its own right. It is probably one of the few decks in the format that can just outright contest Beelzemon. Of course, I think it's still Beelzemon favored, but nonetheless, I think it's still very, very good. Hunters is a deck that draws casually like 4 or 5 in a single turn, because everything just has draw 1. Not only that, but your entire game plan is just play Tamer for like the first 3 or 4 turns, and then suddenly out of nowhere, you just kind of win the game between Arresterdramon giving you Rush into the Superior mode to tuck away, and you also have access to Quartzmon, Clockman's giving you plus security attack, and it's just a whole lot of like card advantage out of nowhere. It's not intuitive to play, I would say. It actually is not very intuitive.
The best description I've heard for this deck is that you do nothing and then you win the game.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not an intuitive deck. Like if you play this deck for the first time, it's gonna feel weird. Like, just admittedly so, it's going to feel very weird. But once you understand, like, all you're doing is really just playing Tamers for like the first few turns, it's gonna like click in your head and like, oh, this is actually a very, very good deck. So yeah, Hunters is tier 1. Its form of removal is literally no other deck in the game, except for like Bogger Army, I guess, if you really want to, has anything like it. So yeah. And then we're gonna go in order of like when it was released or got support or like whatever, something like that. That being said, SecCon is probably the oldest deck on this entire tier list, from all the way from 1.5. SecCon is, I don't think it did particularly well in BT11, but it's one of those things where like we can never just ignore it, because it's just if your deck's not prepared to fight it, sometimes you just kind of get like rolled over. That being said, I think SecCon got a lot worse this format, and not in the sense of like, oh, SecCon in of itself got like bad quality of cards. More like all of its bad matchups got a lot better. So you're looking at Crossheart, for example. Crossheart is already a bad matchup. Crossheart didn't get like a ton of buffs, but like it's still a very powerful deck, and it's probably going to be still a very popular deck going forward. You have Blue Flare, and Blue Flare has always historically been a very terrible matchup. Red Hybrid just got new support, and Red Hybrid historically been a very bad matchup for security control, because you have BT7Aldamon, which negates your security checks. You have Beelzemon. If they run the X antibody, then they're able to burn prior to the 2 swing. If they have 30 and trash, what they probably opt for, because you're playing SecCon, so you're not going fast, they can burn 3, and so you're just giving them a lot of like leverage in that sense. Hunters is the same like Crossheart, where they have a save mechanic, so they can kind of just tuck away their stuff and just play around for advantage. Am I missing anything? I feel like there's more that just beats SecCon. Like Blue Hybrid, I guess. Like, I don't know. Regular Crossheart, Wargreymon with Yuya, if you want to go about that route, is also like super viable. Whether it's promo OTK or BT12 Wargrey, they do all have access to Yuya, and Yuya makes your life a lot harder.
Yeah, it's one of those deck, like, the strategy of SecCon has always been the way it is,
Yeah.
and it's like if you beat it, great. If you don't beat it, you probably are never beating it if you don't have the tools to go
Yeah.
around the security.
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happens that we got much more mechanics in the game that's just like very much less acceptable to security nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Like the way cross-play the game, they really don't care if they lose their stack to security usually because they just get all the pieces back and go again, which they in the case of Crossfire, you actually want your stuff to die, right? Like,
Yeah.
How many times have you swung like a cross 3 and we're like, hey, I hope this dies so I can go into a second cross 3, right? Like, happens all the time, right?
Right.
Well, yeah. So, and then you have Beelzemon just burning multiple security now.
Yeah. So, I don't think SecCon is like anywhere near tier 1 or even 1.5 for that matter, but I do think it's probably still stronger than tier 3 just because of like what SecCon brings to the table. So it's like it's tier 2.
Yeah, it's gonna gatekeep
Yeah.
the weaker strategies
Right.
to playing the game.
And so going next, we do have Belstar being introduced from BT6, and it's still making its way around. It did recently make top 32 in the North American Nationals, thanks to Primitive, who was playing, I think, Belstar Loop or something along those lines. And so Belstar, again, it kind of falls into the same issues that SecCon does have, where like a lot of your bad matchups got a lot better. So, for example, Red Hybrid, who is able to nullify a lot of your security, is just outright much better. Beelzemon is probably not a cakewalk either. Crossheart, Hunters, etc. Like, it's just... I don't know. Like, I don't have a lot of faith in Belstar, unfortunately, in this format. I had a lot of faith in it, weirdly enough, in BT11. But come BT12, I think it's just not as great. Do you think it's fair that we put this in tier 3? Or do you think this is like tier 2, given like SecCon?
I think it probably can be tier 2 because it does have that. I think it's one of those decks where the really good player like Prim can still take advantage of it, and they can probably top an event. So I don't think it's like tier 3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like if you're really good and you're really familiar with this deck and you just don't run into a bunch of Doom matchup, you can probably top an event here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's fine. Tier 2 is probably acceptable.
Okay. Going up next, we do have MachineDramon, and so if you don't know, I've been on a bit of a rant about MachineDramon. I've been loving this deck a lot recently, ever since we got the Ultimate Cups announcements, and I was like, oh, let me like mess around with this, and like ever since then, I've just absolutely been in love with this deck. It has a lot of things going for it. You do get Chaosdramon X, which like I personally don't really like the card, but I digress. I know a lot of people do, and that's its own playstyle where you're running like Dorumon and stuff to get like Giga value, and you have immunity to a lot of stuff. That being said, the two best decks in the format are not good matchups for you. Hunters is able to tuck away your MachineDramon, and you may be like, oh, but like, what if you just don't play a Tamer, or you just don't play a second body? Then like, what are they gonna do? And you have Megadramon, you pop their Tamers. The reality of the matter is that like all it takes is one analog man to accidentally slip out of security, and then you're doomed. Like that's the matchup. If you don't have analog man slip out of security, then like, okay, you're probably okay. But then you remember, like, oh, they can just go into Quartzmon, and then Quartzmon taps out your MachineDramon or Chaosdramon or like whatever it is. And if that's tapped out, then like you can't do much to it. Like, I don't know what you're doing to Quartzmon, but it's not much. But yeah, so I just think in general the amount of protection it does have, it's a lot more consistent nowadays as well. It is. I do think it warrants being a tier 2 deck, but into tier 1, it's not making that push. Oh, and also Beelzemon, you're like, oh, but I have protection against Beelzemon, and you have Kakuamon to prevent the warp. And then Beelzemon casually puts you to 0 on turn 3, and they're just way too fast, and you just feel really sad about life, you know? So that's how I feel about MachineDramon. I don't know if you feel a different way or not.
I don't have strong opinion about MachineDramon.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's fine, but like the playstyle, like, it's a really cool decking concept, right? You try to play this Voltron deck where you just get all your pieces and you go off, and in theory it should be good, but I still think it's way too fair.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't do enough even when you get to it, right? You just get like this blocker that can block multiple times, and you're like, you can kind of swing a little bit big. You don't even swing that big. You're like 13, 14, so like around that number.
Yeah.
And then you have like protection that's neat, but like Blackwood like Wargreymon and Black already kind of did what you did, basically in a lot of ways. So in many ways, this just felt like a more budget version, a weaker version of Black Work.
Yeah. Okay, and so up next we do have AncientGreymon OTK. This did recently make top 8. I think it was regionals from Mario, and so Ancient OTK does get some buffs in BT12 in the form of all the new red hybrid support. So now you have Flamemon that is discard 1, draw 2. You have new Agunimons. You did get a new Burning Greymon as well, and so you just get a lot of new tools. And get a new Takuya as well, which is really fantastic. And that being said, Ancient OTK, this is basically the precursor to what BT9 decks were. When Chungman and I made the first appearance for Ancient OTK back in BT7, the concept is all the same shtick, right? You're just building and raising, and then you come out and then just like swing face, Omni for game, blah. And so with decks like Beelzemon, with decks like Hunters, these are kind of decks that like kind of want to interact with your opponent to an extent. And Ancient OTK is probably one of the few decks that really just does not interact whatsoever. And unlike the other BT9 style of decks, you have BT7 Aldemon, who is giving you immunity to that security options. So no, you're not losing to any Warring or Rivals Barrage or 7th Cluster. But you're still probably not like the fastest deck in the shed. So I feel like to me this is like a very solid tier 2 deck. I'm not sure if you feel any differently on that.
The new hybrid support helps it a lot. I just think the new Takuya is also really good.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to talk about the next few decks?
Yeah, I was gonna go talk about red hybrid.
Okay.
So, as I said, I think the new Takuya is such a cool card, like such a powerful card. And if you don't know what the new Takuya does, it basically says when you do a security check, you can chew memory.
Yeah, not to mention it's also a memory tamer, by the way, which is absolutely huge for this deck.
Yeah, getting to play a good memory tamer and not have be tie around, because a lot of times, right, like you play like red tie, that card is useless in a lot of your stacks because hybrid decks often just want to evolve and swing right away instead of trying to build stacks, right? So in here you have the Takuya, which give you like 2 extra 1000 DP, and if you're 10 or more, you gain the 2 memory effect that I mentioned earlier, which is very easy to get because most things in this deck, if you evolve it like once, you get the 10,000 DP, and then not to mention you have like Atomic, right? Atomic Inferno.
Yeah, and which is giving you 3000 DP plus security attack plus 1.
Yeah, so like sometimes you have this set up, you just evolve your hybrid, and you go like a double atomic, and just go bam. I'm doing 3 security checks, and then I'm getting all my memory back. And then on top of that, you have the new Agunimon, which when it dies, play back you can play a Takuya.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, sorry. As a ESS on deletion, when it dies, you get Takuya back. So like, you just have all these cards that just let you play like this very aggressive aggro style. That isn't. I don't know. It just felt different than the kind of aggro that Melga play, which is like just build a single stack and do like a bunch of swings, right? But it's more like you keep recurring this tamer. It just feels very refreshing to play, even though it's kind of still degenerate aggro.
Yeah, and so I think the amount of floating that you're able to do, because most of your stacks are realistically going to float back into Takuya, and so if your opponent also hits a Takuya off the security check, it just gives you so much tempo. You still have access to cards like Bokomon. Bokomon is a huge just generating advantage constantly. You have new Flamemon, which is essentially it's not pot of greed because you have to discard 1, but you're getting a body out of it too, so like it's nifty. It's probably one of the few decks in the format that can contest the speed of Beelzemon. I still think it's Beelzemon favored, but sometimes you just kind of hit the nuts with Atomic Inferno and everything like that. So it's probably like a very firm like tier 1.5 deck, just because like how aggressive you can be and how much like damage you're really just going to output onto the board. If you're not prepared to deal with the red hybrid matchup, I think you can definitely get just like completely taken off the map. So that's how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so do you want to talk about the next deck as well?
Yeah. So Blue Hybrid. This is a deck that, the terror of the BT7 meta. and we kind of see it got hit with multiple bans. Was it the first deck that got hit with multiple bans? I guess you can count green and BT4 with both HPD and Argo level 5 being hit.
Yeah, it was technically it's green, but I mean, blue hybrid only had because Ice Wall was before that, right? Ice Wall was before Tommy was.
I thought Ice Wall was with Tommy. What was it really before?
I don't know. I can't actually remember the time. Wait, no, wasn't it Savior plus Reinforce plus Ice Wall? And then Tommy plus Jet Sylphie got hit later.
Yeah, and then
something like that. I don't know. Something like that.
Yeah, and then also white option, right?
Yeah, MDF. That's right. Yeah.
This is one of those decks that just got hit with multiple bans because it kept being a problem even after getting hits. Like it from the Japanese version, it lost in what total 4 cards. 4 cards got hit. But
yeah,
but I don't know. It's a cool deck. It got some support with the new blue hybrid stuff. I don't personally. I mean, I think Ranamon is really cool. Like you get jamming and stuff like that. One of this deck issues sometimes is like you lose your your power is really low, right? And you swing your Kuma and you lose your Kuma, and that kind of feels bad. So I think Rana allow you to play a little bit more aggressive with the deck.
Also, if I remember correctly, Ranamon also gives you jamming for the entire turn, so you can go into the Beowulf on top of that and swing very safely, knowing that your Beowulf is going to survive. And then once you bounce one of your opponent's Digimon, I believe it's it's level 3, right? Or is it 4 and lower? It's one of those. Then you can evolve into the Mirage Galgamon, and then just bounce another card or burn a security. And this is a deck that actually got both 2nd and 3rd place in the most recent Latin America regional event, which I think it's actually very interesting because with Sora Joe specifically is very, very strong into Beelzemon, Hunters, Crossheart, even Red Hybrid to an extent, right? Because they're just dropping off the Flamemons and the Bokomons and such like that, right? So I think just the difference between this and Blue Flare is the fact that your space. Blue Flare has to fit the Blue Flare engine, whereas Blue Hybrid is much more open-ended about how much they can fit. So you can fit in the Hammer Sparks, you can fit in Sora Joe, you can it's a lot easier to fit in Sorai. There's just a lot of different things that you can do with Blue Hybrid. I think this is a deck that's just very flexible, and it just happens to pair really well into the field.
Yeah, Great Maelstrom is a pretty solid removal for this deck too.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, Great Maelstrom. If you guys don't know what that is, it's a 9-cost blue option, but if you tuck away, I believe it's a level 3 Digimon underneath one of your other Digimon, something along those lines.
It's level 3. It's the same condition that Rana gaining jamming, which is placing a level 3.
Well, and then a bot decks one of your opponent's Digimon. So it comes at 6 cost if you do that. So that's actually a pretty solid blue option until we get. I want to say it's Crescent Blaster in BT12, BT13, something like those. It's the Mirage Galgamon burst mode option, but I digress. Just blue hybrid feels pretty good.
I think this deck is probably tier 2.
Yeah.
Maybe even entertain it at bottom of 1.5. I just think hybrid strategy is really powerful in this meta because the great boogeyman of all Tamer deck, Black Wargreymon, just got shot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So all these hybrid strategy is a lot more viable in this meta because because you don't have too many ways of interacting with Tamers.
Mm-hmm.
This deck feel really solid with from what I've seen the way it plays.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's talk about one deck that did get support, but it did not fare as well. So let's talk about armors.
Yeah.
Let's get it out of the way. I think armors 2-3.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I have very little faith whatsoever in armors.
Yeah. The issue with armor, I think, is that armor cards on average are too weak nowadays. And yeah, it did get new Vmon, but the new Vmon are more meant to be Imperialdramon support than it is armor support.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. You got a new Vmon, it's neat.
Well, so I think one of the bigger things is that first of all, this deck becomes a lot better in EX4 once you get access to the new gold Veedramon as well as Heaven's Judgment or Heaven's Thunder. But we don't have those yet, so obviously we're playing with a very feels kind of bad style. And so you're like, okay, but you have Magnamon X's like control aspect, and so let's really think about it. Like, how effective is that really in the grand scheme of things? Well, Beelzemon is probably too fast for you. Hunters just tucks you away, or you just get tucked away. You're probably okay in a red hybrid, but they're also just going to swing over you, which feels really bad. Blue hybrid can go ahead and strip your sources. I guess if you're playing like a Greymon style of deck, they have access to Digivolve, so they're just going to put you back into Magnamon. You're good into Crossheart if you get into Magnamon X fast enough. Like, specifically, you're good into Merva Cross, which I think is like pretty nifty because like I don't think they have a very clean way to kill the Magnamon X. Because Magnamon X, or is it 11k? Magnamon X is 11k, right? If it's 11k, then Merva actually just swings over you. So like, for the most part, you're good into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, just a lot of your matchups aren't very great for you.
Wait for BT13 for the new Magnamon.
Just wait a little bit longer, and then like you can play armors again. But like right now, it's not the wave. But yeah.
To be completely fair, even with the new Magna, you're not that good. But it's something.
Well, okay. I think in EX4, you're at least tier 2 with Heaven's Thunder. That card is like kind of crazy. It's with a single armor on your board that is minus 18k, which is kind of crazy. Yeah.
Heaven's Judgment, right?
Yeah, that card's crazy. 7 cost minus 18k to the board, and you can break it into the 6k into like fragments. Like, I think it's so huge. And it allows you to play like control based armors, which I think is like super solid.
But, yeah. Fair enough, and you can also make the argument like you have the ability to go into ruin mode off of
you also can go into ruin mode, which I think ruin mode is just such an insane buff to so many like decks.
Okay, fair enough. Okay,
but we're not there yet, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, let's move on. Go ahead and take over for Maste.
All right.
I know you've been talking about this deck a lot.
Okay, so Mastemon in BT11 post ban list is pretty good. The worst matchup that you had in the form of Black Wargreymon kind of got its kneecap shot, and now that with Greymon X at 1, if they don't see it, their speed is a lot slower, which means that you can actually contest them for board state and everything like that with Mirai and everything, so you can go much faster. So I actually think this is a very current BT11. That being said, in BT12, everything changes because everything, unfortunately, gets faster. Beelzemon X is super awkward to play into because they'll just burn away your security, they'll pop away your board, Hunters can tuck you away, Red Hybrid is probably just going to play way too fast for you, and also they get incentive if you decide to block them. Like Atomic Inferno gives back 3 memory if you decide to block, and then if you don't block, you're probably going to take too much damage. And that's just not great all around. And then, of course, new Wargreymon support can be a little bit tricky. Of course, that's like a lot more doable, but I digress. You do have a pretty solid matchup into Merva Cross, but you have a really bad... Your matchup into Cross 7 variants are kind of awkward. And decks like Blue Flare and D-Reaper and stuff like that can also be tend to be awkward at times. And Melga, depending on the Melga build, can also just be very awkward. AncientGreymon takes you to like AncientGreymon with blue plugin is very difficult. AncientGreymon without blue plugin you're probably fine into. So with all of that being said, it's kind of mid right now. In BT12, I feel like it's kind of mid. Not gonna lie. It's hard for me to, it's hard to say like whether it's a tier 3 or a tier 2 deck. Like, I feel like you could justify it being in like one or the other, but I think given how difficult Maste is to pilot for the average player, and given just like your matchup spread into like the higher tier decks, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult. But maybe you feel differently about this.
I don't. I think the deck is way too slow.
Yeah, okay, good talk. Coming up next, we do have Ophani Loop, and as far as
Hayes has no fate in it.
In Maste, yeah, no, I know he gave up on this deck too. He is now a Beelzemon enthusiast, which, to be honest, I think everyone is going to become a Beelzemon enthusiast if you want to win an event. Ophani Loop is something that Human has really been pushing for recently. I just don't. If Maste is not good, I don't have faith in this one either. To me, it suffers all of the same bad matchups as Mastemon, if not worse. So yeah, this is like tier 3 for me. Like you have access to like on Digivolve heal, and you can loop it with analog youth and stuff like that. But If you get tucked away, then like, does it really matter?
Yeah, strategy focusing around on deletion just get weaker and weaker unless you have a lot of ways to self pop.
The one exception is red hybrid, but that's only because they're swinging, they're ramming you in the face at the same time. So if you don't take care of the issue, you're probably losing.
The deck isn't relying on getting value on on deletion. It's like the on deletion let you keep going, right?
Yeah.
Like if it loses the on deletion, then it's a little bit slower, but like it's still you're still fighting against the train, right?
Right.
Where like what the heck is Ophani doing to you? Doing like one check and healing?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Oh.
Okay, and so going into D-Reaper now. D-Reaper is a deck that has picked up a lot of steam at the tail end of BT11 because of the resurgence of Beelzemon. Beelzemon being a purple deck does mean you have very little to no ways, actually, of popping the Gatekeeper. Being able to pop Gatekeeper does mean that you will not be able to actually push for game in most situations. And so, looking at D-Reaper going into BT12, yes, Beelzemon did get a lot faster, but I think there's also room for the D-Reaper deck to potentially evolve and adapt to this increase in speed, being in the form of Creepy Hands, or Creep Hands, right, which is the blocker for D-Reaper. If you have the blocker, which they cannot pop, then you might be able to stave off a little bit of lethal, generate some time to get into your D-Reaper, etc. That matchup will need a lot more testing, but it's possible, I think. Hunters is unable to tuck anything underneath because Hunter's superior mode requires, it looks at level, and obviously none of the D-Reapers have level, so they can't tuck anything away with superior mode. The thing that they're going to have to rely on in order to actually beat D-Reaper is going to be the Quartzmon, because the Quartzmon will just tap out the entire board. But if Quartzmon's not ending the game soon enough, then your opponent can, as the D-Reaper player, you very well could just go into Reaper and then play off Oh, you can't Reaper!
You cannot Reaper.
Oh my god!
Reaper not unsuspend.
Oh,
but you can always play like a different base. You can play red base and have one more removal option.
Yeah, that is actually, okay. Now that I say it out loud, that is very awkward, right? Because like they can't remove your stuff until they get to Quartz, and you're probably like easy farming them until they get to the Quartz. And like once they get to the Quartz, then it gets a lot trickier. So you're gonna have to find a solution to get around that.
The other thing is the deck isn't gonna give you the way that D-Reaper play into that matchup is you don't even have to give them free checks, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not giving them free tamers and like free draws and all that off of your check. You can just like, hey, if you don't play the Quartz before I get here, I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah, and then and then red hybrid is probably too fast for you. Decks like Blue Flare, decks like Blue Hybrid, they don't have any ways to actually remove the Gatekeepers cleanly unless they're running stuff like Great Maelstrom and stuff like that. So that's very awkward for them.
It's not even like the too fast part, right? It's just they're just doing multiple checks. So
your
Gatekeeper, even though you're running a blocker, maybe the blocker can help the matchup a little bit. If you
but then they're getting back +3 memory off the Atomic Inferno.
Yeah. The thing is they're playing red, so like they're not having issue killing your stuff. Like they can go into the new Emperor and just pop your Gatekeeper.
I think
like that's not an issue.
I think the biggest thing that really holds this deck back from entering the 1.5 territory is Wargreymon's presence. Being able to use BT8 Metal Gray and then raid into the D-Reaper, I think it's just gonna it's just you raid into Mother and Mother's dead. So like this is unironically probably the best deck for tier 2, but I don't think it goes any higher than tier 2 because of that.
Okay, so here's the argument against that though. What people just don't play BT8 Metal Greymon because it's now way too slow without Greymon X.
So I think a lot more people are, obviously with I believe it's Latin America, running the 2 win rate 60%. And win rate 60% does solve this speed issue that compensating for the loss of Greymon X. So I think if we do see that adaptation going forward for the Wargreymon decks in BT12, I think Wargreymon will more than likely stick around.
Does that solve the speed issue? Because win rate require you setting up a tamer, so you still spend a turn.
Oh yeah, no, they have this really cool tamer. His name is called Cool Boy. So I don't know. Cool Boy to me is kind of just never felt like a neg in a turn. It's gonna pay out dividends. I mean, it literally does pay out dividends. Actually, like on the turn, it plays itself. It pays out dividends. So. I mean, if you want to argue with me about Cool Boy, like by all means, but.
No, I think tier 2 is very solid placement for it.
I do too.
The deck, I would not be surprised if this deck randomly just see a top.
I wouldn't either. I could very well expect this deck to see a top.
Yeah, like I can see like the top part of tier 2 just randomly topping.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Gallantmon, your favorite. Let me hear it, bro.
I feel like I say the same thing every tier list about this deck. Like, it's still way too fair. All of the way that you play the game is so reliant on your opponent doing stuff, right? Like, on paper, because you have Crimson Mo, you're quote unquote should be favored into Beelzemon X, but you're not, because they get to dictate when they hit certain threshold in trash, and not really you the one who's dictating it, right? So sometimes they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna hit 20 or 30 in trash this turn, and then I'll burn you for 2 or 3 and then end the game. Like, you don't even get the opportunity to burn them because you're on average slower. The new Wargreymon X is excellent. I love the new Wargreymon X. Great card.
You mean did you mean just regular Wargreymon, right?
Sorry, Wargreymon. It speed up the deck. Sorry, that bring up to my other point. The new support, while the new Takuya is not Takuya, the new Takado is really good. He's kind of awkward because he requires specifically Growlmon, War Growl, and Gilmon, and not the X variant. So that means you cannot use the X variant for his condition. So you run into a consistency issue where if you're playing like the old ratio before, where you're like abusing Kuboy, because as you said, Kuboy is like just a great advantage engine, and you're abusing Kuboy to get all of the X form value, then yeah, it's a lot. The deck is a lot more awkward. If you don't play Kuboy, and I know people seem to think like you don't need to play Kuboy in the deck. Yeah, you don't need to play Kuboy in the deck, but not playing Kuboy makes the deck a lot slower. Speed is the issue with this deck. Like, you play like almost a. You want to play tempo, but often you're not fast enough to play tempo because the deck requires you to play a tamer to gain bliss. Otherwise, a lot of time you're just evolving and doing nothing if you don't have your tamer set up. So you're like, not only are you piece reliant, but your payoff isn't that good. Like, the new Gallon is okay. It has Ray, it can remove stuff, great. Like, it finally solved like one of the main issue with the deck. It's like you can't deal with on deletion. Right now you can finally just punch it. Great. But then it's just like a burn one. So they're kind of starting to address the issue with Gallantmon is like you don't do a lot into empty board. So now you're kind of like getting value if your opponent is not playing board, but then like half your old support are still like, oh, I require my opponent to have a board or meet certain condition. So it's just in this awkward phase where the new cards are pretty good, but it still need more cards to like play the game plan that it wants to play. EX4 is going to be a good boost to the deck because EX4 does give you the new Gilmon, and the new Gilmon, game rush. So you can use the new Gilmon in combination with the new Takado to warp into a Gallant from empty board. So that's a pretty cool thing. But overall, deck is tier 2.
Okay. And do you think it's like mid tier 2, high tier 2, low tier 2? Where are we putting this? Where do you feel? I'll let you choose.
Let me see. You absolutely smash the Reaper.
Okay.
Yeah, like there's no way you lose that matchup.
No, that matchup is so easy for Gallant. Yeah, it's not even funny.
Crossheart sucks to play into. So does Hunters because their stuff doesn't
great top.
Doesn't go to trash.
Great top. Middle smack jab.
Yeah, you lose to BLs. You are slower than the Red Hybrid, so you lose to Red Hybrid. Yeah, you beat Bloom. Yeah.
Hooray! Okay, moving on. Grandis Kuwagamon, one of the terrors of the BT9 format. I'm just gonna flat out say it. I don't think this deck is very good anymore. Even in BT11, the deck is not very good anymore. Across all the 4 most recent regionals across all of the English-speaking countries, there has been a single Grandis Kuwagamon top. Just one. And I know it won an EU event, so like good for them. But just in general, you've lost one of your best matchups in the form of Black Wargreymon going into BT12. The field just gets a lot harder. Wargreymon, your good matchup is actually not even a good matchup anymore because now Wargreymon's hitting like 18, 21k, thanks to like cards like Grandis X and just Tie and all this other stuff. Beelzemon has 9 security bombs, so good luck not hitting one of those. Red Hybrid is playing too fast. Beelzemon's playing too fast. Hunters is probably putting you on the clock as well, to be very honest with you. If you swing, you don't kill them, they're probably going to hit like enough tamers to just swing tempo entirely in their favor. In general, Grandis Quartzmon just feels like a lot worse of a deck now, and like I genuinely don't see it being like super great. I don't know. I'm just not very optimistic for this deck. I do think it's still tier 2, purely off the virtue of being a linear OTK deck that sometimes you will just steal the game, and it's just stronger than anything in tier 3. But like it feels like a bottom tier 2 deck. Like it's borderline into tier 3, and that's just a result of you had one niche in the format, and that niche was to eliminate Black Wargreymon, and that niche is no longer required. So I don't know.
Yeah. Even then, like, you weren't removing Wargreymon that consistently.
Yeah, exactly. Because
you only hit like 18, 19.
You hit 18. 18 on the dot, I'm pretty sure is the average.
Can you hit 19?
No. Or if you run some like weird tech, maybe. But like the average is you're hitting 18 because Grandis swings for 16 plus Yoko hit 18. So unless you have like some kind of other inheritable that's giving you plus 1 or 2k, it's not happening.
Yeah, Wargreymon was regularly hitting 20k, 2021.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Melvamon X was 3. New Wargreymon is 3, and then like inheritable is like 2k max, and then you also have the new Tie. So like you weren't even swinging over that Wargreymon.
Yeah.
Like you were losing that race. So I don't know. Like the deck just like I don't see a reason to play this over BLs. Yeah. If you're playing like this kind of OTK style deck, why not just play BLs?
Yeah. But speaking of OTK decks, it's your favorite OTK deck, Melga. How do you want to take this one?
Yeah. I think it saw some success after the hit in BT11, right? Because deck is still good. One of its worst matchup is gone. Granted, I don't think the Black Wargreymon matchup was that terrible. It's very winnable.
Agreed.
Yeah, but it was a very annoying matchup that required you to build and play differently, which make your deck weaker into the rest of the meta. So it's still like if you just look at the deck by itself, right? It still does what it wants to do. It's very good, but you run into this one very big issue in this meta. His name is Quartzmon. And I think this is true for a lot of blue decks it's just a lot of blue decks right now, right, in the game, is how do you deal with Quartzmon? And Melga answer is really nothing. You go into Omnimon X and you remove the Quartzmon, and then you kind of lose the game from that point.
Okay, come on, but you have like Kokaida's breath, like D. Like, come on, D. Like, there are solutions. I say with like a hint of sarcasm in my voice because, like, yeah, it's not great.
The issue is, like you're moving out, and you're doing like if you open here's the caveat. I would put this deck in tier 2 with an asterisk, right? Melga opening the nuts can still probably take games off of like BLs and Hunters and all that. But on average, you're probably a little bit slower than Red Hybrid, and you're probably a little bit slower than you're probably quite a bit more slower than BLs. And they have security bomb, they ignore your security bomb. So like that matchup is not very great.
Yeah.
Like it is like even before they got BLs, I've tested this into Haze playing the BT11 version without Beelzemon Hex, right? And that matchup felt winnable, but like is not great.
I mean, yeah, they're playing 9 security bombs, so like it only takes 1 to ruin your day, you know?
Yeah, and then the moment you lose your stack, Beelzemon just kill you.
Exactly. So like, where are we putting this Melga enthusiast, huh? Where are you?
I think mid tier 2.
Mid tier 2, good enough for me. All right.
Like you have to dodge a lot of tier 1.
Makes sense. Okay, so Blue Flare. Blue Flare is a blue deck that has been picking up a lot of steam alongside Blue Hybrid, actually. And the entire niche that you do have is that you can stun out a lot of these decks. And so, for example, if you play in Beelzemon, and Beelzemon, they have their Impmons on board, you can tap out their Impmons, which is, pretty good. Like it does what Blue Hybrid wants to do, but like with like a little bit easier. The difference really being in like the space that you have with Blue Hybrid being able to play Sora, Joe plus Hammer Spark and stuff like that, and Blue Flare you have to fit other like actual Blue Flare cards into your engine between like 4 Kiriha, 4 Blazing Memory Boosts, etc. But the deck is pretty good. Like the deck is unironically pretty good. Into Hunters, you can strip out their sources, tap them out. It gets kind of awkward for them, but like at the same time, yeah, they can just like tuck you away. So like you're just playing like an awkward game of chicken, if you will. And versus like Merva Cross, you can tap out Merva Cross, which is pretty nice. Red Hybrid, you can stun them out if they don't put you on the clock fast enough. But decks like D-Reaper are just very difficult. So I would say like Blue Flare is probably like, I personally am a believer it's in a 1.5, just because like to me it feels like it might be a stronger version of Blue Hybrid in this format because of, like you just have much more accessible stun potential. But with all of that being said, I can also see a world where it's just tier 2 because like Beelzemon X just might be too fast enough. It might just be too fast for the deck. So like I'm gonna say like bottom 1.5, like top tier 2, like kind of like teetering on that little edge. I'm not sure if you feel any differently about that.
No, like as I said, I think Tamer strategy is really strong in this meta because of the nerf to Wargreymon.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, with Wargreymon as well. If you just strip them out completely, then like it's very hard for them to even do anything. But then,
yeah, without I would say without the ban, this tier list would look very different. I think it would literally just be BLs and work in tier 1 and then everything else below that, right?
Yeah, Hades Force would be a lot more of a problematic card, I would say, but because the speed okay, this is its own whole discussion, we'll talk about it when we get there, but yeah, Hades Force is not as big of an issue as it was in JP's BT12 equivalent. But going next, we do have Merva Loop. This is a very It's pretty cool deck actually, because you have Minerva, you swing Minerva pops itself, goes into Merva pulls out 2 bodies, and you can swing. You can swing with all 3 of those bodies, and that's pretty cool. And then if you have back for revenge, you can get back you can back the Minerva that popped into the Merva, and the Minerva can pop into another Merva, and you generate 6 bodies or 7 bodies on that turn. So that's really cool. And then the Minerva can also attack. With all that being said, I think you might be too slow going into BLs. I think you have a very strong niche against cross decks because whenever they play something, then Minerva can play out a card in response. So I think that there's like a niche there. But just in general, decks like Ancient OTK, decks like BLs, decks like Red Hybrid, they might give you a little bit of trouble just because they're a lot faster than you are. So like while you're trying to set up your deck, you're just getting gunned down like a dog. So yeah.
I do think this deck got a significant buff with the Mulligan system.
Oh, agreed. 100%. I totally agree.
Yeah, so because for some reason the Loop player tend to be the most greedy player on the planet.
Wait, just say his name. Just yeah, it's Ying. Okay, just say his name. All right, let's not beat around the bush. All right, it's Ying Human Hoang. All right, Mr. Loop enthusiast himself, running 6 rookies. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, I do think the deck is still pretty solid. Though with that said, I do think the Mulligan system is very good for the game, but it also improved the consistency of deck that's already consistent, right?
Yeah.
While it might help inconsistent deck like this, it reduced the chance of a deck of a high tier consistent deck from breaking. So yeah. I do think overall this deck is probably too slow now because you're gonna have less of those games where like something like BLs just breaks and become unplayable.
Yeah, but realistically speaking, I think this Merva Cross is probably in the tier 2 territory. Just being able to spawn out 7 bodies in a single turn is a lot. Being able to go that wide is a lot even for decks like Beelzemon at times. So I think there's like a niche kind of there. Probably like a little bit lower, but like I digress. It's like somewhere around here, I think.
Yeah, I can see it topping.
Yeah, I could too. Coming up next, we do have Crossheart, and this is specifically the Cross 7 variant. Cross 7 does get access to the new Cross 7 Superior mode, which is a secret rare, and that can digicross with any number of materials as long as they all have different names. I don't think Cross 7 is as good as it was in the BT11 iteration. Like, yes, Hades Force is not as big of a problem, but Hades Force still does exist. Not only does Hades Force still exist to a certain extent, but also Quartzmon is a lot more that you have to deal with. Being able to tap out Taiki, being able to tap out the Tri-Tamer, your plays are very much so limited. It gets a lot harder to actually play the game as Cross 7, unlike Merva Cross, who is making the Merva play from hand, reviving from trash, so things that ignore Quartzmon. So because of that, I think the Cross 7 variant of this deck is actually a lot weaker going into the new format. It's still like decent, like it's still pretty solid, and you're better into the grind matchups than Merva Cross is, but just in general, Quartzmon and Hades are probably just a bit too much for you to have to deal with.
I will say the new Cross 7 Superior mode can play from trash, so
yeah,
if they are slow to set the course, you can definitely play around that with the new Superior mode, because you're not as reliant on having sources under your tamer all the time.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. And then Jesmon, my favorite Digimon, who unfortunately gets so much worse in this format. Like, it's kind of unbelievably funny how much worse it gets in this format. So in BT11, the niche was that you had a good Black Wargreymon matchup for like the most part. Come to find out, hey, Wargreymon style of decks are nerfed. Okay, so there's less of a niche for Jesmon now. Okay, well, how's our rest of our matchups? Well, we're terrible into Blue Flare, and we're not beating Hunters, because Hunters is going to go, oh, nice Jesmon GX. It would be a shame if it got tucked under a sister. Boop. Beelzemon is too fast, and not only that, but our only form of protection against Beelzemon is actually Sistermon Blanc from the starter deck with Decoy. It's not great. Red Hybrid's probably too fast, and just like a whole other slew of issues that just... Jesmon feels really bad in BT12. It gets a lot better in BT13 with the new support, but in BT12, you don't get any new tools, and your matchups get a lot worse. So this is like... To me, I just wouldn't play Jesmon. This feels like a dead deck for a format. Yeah, so that's how I feel, at least, about that situation. And then... coming up next, we do have BloomLord. BloomLord is a huge fan favorite amongst green players, especially because this is like the second coming of like green. Because Grandis doesn't feel like a green deck. Grandis feels like a BT9 deck, whereas Bloom actually does feel like a green deck. Saris Nidhogg kind of style of deck. Bloom does get a significant buff in this set in the form of Quartzmon. Being able to turbo into Quartzmon is absolutely fantastic. But like, you are super bad into Beelzemon. Like, it's not even like kind of funny, it's just like bad. Like, it sucks just like across the board. Like,
it is the most tilting matchup to freaking play. I hate it.
It's bad. It's like really bad.
Like, you do your thing and you have all your stuff on board, right? And then Beelzemon is just like, I'm just gonna randomly mill. Oh look, I mill into a pop. Time to lose your body on board. Oh, I evolved my Impmon over my new starter deck Impmon. Oh yeah, that pops a level 3. That pops a Digimon.
Pops a 3. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just very obnoxious because you just randomly lose pieces all the time.
Yeah. So I mean, like, it's still a strong deck because Quartzmon is a strong card, but like your matchup into BLs is so terrible. But like, you're like good enough into Wargreymon. You're probably solid enough into like hybrid because like you have Quartz obviously. Blue Flare is easier if you have Cherrymon. Superior mode. Quartz does slow them down a significant amount. That being said, you could also still just happen to get tucked away. So that's kind of a tricky matchup. Just in general, I think Bloom is a very, very strong deck, but like it's not tier 1. Let's just cut to the chase. It's not tier 1. I think it's like middle of 1.5 because it's a fast. It's the fastest deck that can access Quartzmon.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so next we do have DarkKnightmon, and DarkKnightmon has been like a little pet project of mine because like shout out to my boy Fenton2G. He was like, haha, dude, you know what beats Beelzemon? DarkKnightmon. And I sat there and I was like, does it? And then I tested it, and I ended up winning a lot that day. And the reason why DarkKnightmon beats Beelzemon, and okay, disclaimer, it doesn't like beat Beelzemon, like it's not like 70-30, it's more like 60-40 at best, but on average 55-45. The reason
you just went full robot over the whole DarkKnightmon explanation. They're so funny.
Okay, well, I'm hoping that just my mic crapped itself for you and not for like actually the recording, because otherwise I'm gonna be real sad. But
yeah.
Just in general, DarkKnightmon, your advantage against Beelzemon is the fact that like you have DarkKnightmon X, who's a blocker, and he floats into DarkKnightmon DarkKnightmon, and DarkKnightmon has, you can either do the BT12 DarkKnightmon, or you can do the one that floats into 2 other bodies. But the point is, it's a blocker, and so whenever your blockers die, you're usually using it to stop lethal to begin with. If they burn 2 or 3, it doesn't matter if they can't land the final blow to actually beat you, right? So because of that, you just are very you're just very difficult to like get through, making it so like the matchup is like 55-45 on average for DarkKnightmon's favor, but you lose to like almost every single other deck in the format. Like you lose to Superior Mode, you lose to Bloom, you lose to Blue Flare. Like as top of tier 3, your one niche is beating BLs and like sometimes Red Hybrid. That is
beat the hero.
Yeah,
top of the event, farm all the BLs.
I am convinced if your sole goal in life is to ruin a Beelzemon player's day, play DarkKnightmon. And even then, they might be too fast for you because they casually just burn 3. So, coming up next, we do have Examon. Do you want to talk about Examon a little bit?
What to say about Examon? The deck that loses to itself still loses to itself. Gets a very nice buff with Mulligan. But I think on average you need to open really well.
Yeah.
Okay, here I'll say this. I think Exa benefit a lot from the new Mulligan system, right? Because the old Mulligan system was actually not good for you. Because how does this deck break? This deck break by typically not seeing your low hand and seeing all of your high hand at the same time. And if you ever have to put 2 Exa at the bottom of your, like as bottom 5 of your deck, you want to jump off a cliff.
Right.
So the new Mulligan system helps you a lot in that way. Like it helps you the Mulligan without fear, so to speak. So the deck chooses a lot better in that sense. The issue is you lose to quite a few things, in my opinion. I think you lose to, like, I think it's cope to say like you can just set up an Exa without anything else, so that you can't get tucked.
Yeah, you realistically are losing to Hunters. Like you're probably gonna get tucked away. Yeah.
I think you lose to Quartz because you're never unsuspending. Like you're not, like if they play Quartz, you're not unsuspending. So what are you doing?
Right.
Like Red Hybrid. I guess if you set up before they kill you, might be okay. But the thing though, if you try, they're too big for you to block. They're usually like 18, 19. So if you try to block them, they're gonna gain more memory. So they're gonna get the checks in, and a lot of times they're gonna force the evade off of you because they'll just go into New Emperor and force the evade, and then your primary like you will have to make it that stack if you don't make it that, because you can't remove that stack by swinging into it. Otherwise, they just get to kill you back. So you're on the back foot a lot when you play into that deck. You lose to Blue Flare. I think Blue Flare just stun you and you lose the game. So I don't know. It just doesn't look good into a lot of tier 1. Like into Bloom, you're losing to Quit still.
I think the one advantage you have is like into Beelzemon. If you get Exa out turn 2, turn 3, you usually can stabilize very well into them, because you can force a combat against like their stack or like their Antmon or whatever and deny a lot of their plays, and then you have evade to dodge a lot of their removal. So I think into like Beelzemon specifically, you do have some kind of like leg room to mess with there. But yeah, I do agree that into a majority of the higher tier decks, it's kind of feels bad. Like you're realistically probably like in the like middle high tier 2, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Wargreymon. Your favorite deck, James. You wanna have at this one?
I think Mulligan helps this deck a lot too. I don't know. This deck has a lot of play starter, but like it tends to brick. It has bricking problems in the sense that your brick is like unconventional bricks, right? Your brick is not seeing your door brick. Like you're playing a deck that's very reliant on seeing your 4 pieces, and a lot of your game plan is digging for it. And like you're trying to play this weird OTK style where you're just getting a lot of value of your door break out of nowhere, but I don't think that works that well in this meta. Like, it just requires so much to go right compared to other decks.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't see you beating any of the high tier decks. Like that, you have to be a god and open like the nuts to beat BLs on average, right? Like I think they're just way too. I think they're just much faster than you.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably somewhere in tier 2, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Probably like middle low tier 2, just because like you're asking for a lot.
Like I can see somebody top 16 with this deck or something randomly because it's like, oh hey, the guy just open pretty like decently all day. Mulligan does something that like but like I don't know. Like on average, I am not a believer.
Okay, so going next, we do have Merva, and Merva is a deck that has picked up a significant amount of steam in the last few events. This is now the new BDIF for post-banless BT11. This actually is much closer, or Crossart is now closer to tier 0 than Black Wargreymon X was actually in BT11. And so going into BT12, I think Merva is probably one of the few decks that actually contests Beelzemon in terms of speed. Having access to the Blinding and the Gravity Crush means you can contest them on turn 3. And then not only that, but even against Quartzmon, you're not reviving, you're not playing stuff from under your tamers, you're not using your tamers a ton. Rather than that, you're pulling from trash and you're using cards from hand and stuff like that. And so Merva, to me, I think is the last. It is not the last, but it's a tier 1 deck in my opinion. It's like tier 1 or like maybe like super high tier 1.5. But I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt and say it is tier 1 because it is performed far. It's performed far beyond the expectations that anyone had for the deck going into BT11. Like just across the board, like even before the ban list, it performed above expectations, and post ban list, it performed above expectations. So yeah, just in general, I have a lot of faith in Merva now.
Yeah, I think overall, I think we all underestimate how good Crossart would end up doing at Nationals, and it got second in the meta for Black Wargreymon and Hades.
Yeah.
Not this variant of Crossart, but was it Cross 7, right?
It was Cross 7, yes. But Merva ended up winning EU Nats.
Yeah. This deck just feels really good. And again, Mulligan does allow you to play this variation of deck where you're playing a lot of enable pieces like Blinding Ray and ways to gain memory to go into your big combos. You're allowed to run a more heavy option build and not have to worry about opening unplayable hands all the time because you do have access to Mulligan. So I think that's very nice for this deck. I kind of feel like there's a gap between the first 2 decks and this one though. I think it's good, but I feel like there's a gap after Hunters.
I think this deck will realistically perform as well as Hunters, if I'm being very honest with you. I think the real gap lies between Beelzemon and, like, everything else. That's where I think the gap lies.
How do you feel about this deck matchup into Bales?
Like I said, I think it's the one deck that can actually contest BLs for speed. I don't think there's a single deck that's as fast as Merva besides BLs. And because of that, I think if you hit the pieces correctly, you can actually just blow them out of the water on turn 3.
Yeah, I guess if they low roll on milling, huh?
Not even low roll, like on average roll, right? Like on average, if they average roll, you're probably equal speed. They would have to high roll to actually outspeed you. Between all like Zenjiro and Gravity Crush and Blinding, Tri-Tamer, etc. Like I think this deck is that fast. Like I don't know. I have very high expectations for this deck. That or I have much higher expectations for Beelzemon in comparison to everything else. But either way. That being said, I would be okay with putting it in like the high tier 1.5, but I'm going to put it in tier 1 just because like I've underestimated Crossheart far too many times at this point in BT11 upward.
Actually, do you think it can outperform Hunters?
I think it could. I genuinely think there's a possibility this outperforms Hunters.
Okay.
It's a lot more intuitive to play than Hunters for sure. And it's just a lot, like I said, it's a lot faster. For me, Beelzemon versus Hunters, it's Beelzemon favored, whereas I think Merva Cross versus Beelzemon is a very unknown territory for a lot of people because this is not this Merva Cross wasn't exactly like a popular thing in JP, right? It was like a sporadic here and there, whereas now in English format, it's much more popular. So again, this is a matchup that is very untested just across the board, and so I think there's potential here. Going to the next deck, however, is Ulforce, and Ulforce does receive a buff in the form of Ulforce X. However, there is this really big boogeyman in the form of Quartzmon, and unless you have Omnimon or Great Maelstrom, you literally can't beat Quartzmon. So that automatically invalidates any competitive viability for Ulforce, despite being, in my opinion, what is probably the best defensive blocker deck in the format between this and like Leomon and stuff like that. But this is just like eh. This is very eh. It loses to Quartz. Quartz is just too big of an issue. Hunters can tuck you away, and you lose to Bloom just in general, and just a lot of other stuff that just does not go very great for you. It's kind of mid. It's kind of mid. And then you have Promo Black Wargreymon OTK, which is a deck that constantly just keeps coming up. If I remember correctly, one of our friends who plays in the Japanese scene, Desi, he told us that the player who topped JP Nats and then eventually made second place at Worlds, they call him Toki of the Promo Black Wargreymon, actually, because he just refused to play any other deck. And yeah, no, I think Promo Black Wargreymon OTK is a deck that has a lot of potential. Going into BT12, yes, you did lose Greymon X, but you can potentially compensate for that lack of speed using Gravity Crush and using win rate 60%. So I don't think it's like a tier 1.5 or anything, but I definitely do think like it's like a very solid like tier 2 deck in my opinion. Like it's pretty solid. It's pretty solid because you have access to all the new Greymon support. You have access to like Hades still if you really wanted. And yeah, Yuya gives you immunity to a lot of the options that would potentially threaten you. So yeah, a lot of really good stuff across the board. I think it's like really interchangeable.
One really cool interaction with this the Promo Black Wargreymon specifically is that Promo Black Wargreymon says Digiburst to unsuspend, right? It doesn't need to be on board to unsuspend. Oh, it doesn't need to be on board at the time that you suspend to unsuspend, right? Meaning you can do the raid of the new Metal Greymon and get all the effect of the raid, like play a tamer, do all that, and then go into Promo Blackwood, then unsuspend. Now you have all the raid effect that you would. That's very nice in that sense.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, you can raid with Metal Greymon and get the free tie off, and then go into this, and then get all the advantage of it.
Yeah, agreed. And then following up on that, we do have Black Wargreymon X, and this deck got a lot worse losing Greymon X because now you're just Wargreymon, but like much more inferior. And I guess your one incentive is that you have double blocking because of the redirect. But how relevant is double blocking, right? I don't think it's super huge, to be honest with you.
And to answer your question, the new Wargreymon has double block also.
Oh, okay. Then like, what's the point of playing Black Wargreymon X?
I don't know. You can burn. It's just so really slow. Like a redirect instead of blocking. I don't know. Like the new Wargreymon says when the attack target is switched, it unsuspends. So you force the block target switch, it unsuspend. So you technically have double block with the new Wargreymon. So like this really doesn't give a lot of advantage over playing just the pure Wargreymon build in BT12.
So that being said, Black Wargreymon X, I mean, the more we talk about it, the more it just sounds like a tier 3 deck, to be very honest with you. Like, I kind of don't have faith in it.
I don't think it's tier 3. I think
it's probably like bottom tier 2, right?
I think it's still because I think your Greymon support is still really good. And the deck itself is good. It's just slower. You're like a turn slower. Okay. But I think you're still good enough to farm a lot of the decks in tier 2.
It's
like
fair.
If you look at this deck on average into a lot of decks in tier 2, you still beat them. But it's just like it's not beating the tier 1 decks in my opinion. Yeah. Like, you're probably too slow to beat Merva Quest Art. Hunters remove you. BLs outspeed you. Red Hybrid probably kills you before you get set up, and Bloom I think Bloom beats you. So like the one matchup that you may be okay into is like Blue Flare, because you like I think having access to Hades still give you a lot of advantage because this meta is kind of tamer heavy on a lot of the more popular decks.
Yeah.
So I mean, it has that advantage, but yeah, it's definitely 2/2.
It's probably like somewhere around here. And then Imperialdramon does get a ton of new support in BT12. Get a new Vmon, Examon, Stingmon, Dino B, Pyodra, Imperials for both. And all that being said, it just feels mid. It feels really mid. I don't actually like the new top end that you got. I know Dan, talked to Dan briefly about it. And Dan is of the belief that you just play old style of Imperial, but like with the new bottom end kind of stuff. So with that being said, not the biggest believer in this deck. Honestly,
I think it's like bottom 2/2.
It's I think it's like maybe like around here, kind of.
In 2/1, this deck is gonna struggle.
Yeah.
But if you play it, the new support is actually still pretty good.
Yeah.
Like if you play into like a more fair deck, like you play into Gallant, you play into like Ulforce, those kind of stuff. Like even Extra, it can out a lot of those decks. Like the cards it got are pretty solid. They're just way too fair.
Yeah.
And it still suffer from the Jogress problem of like it required a little bit too many pieces compared to a normal deck to function, and it doesn't draw enough.
Yeah.
They didn't give it enough draw power to compensate for the speed that you lost needing to play Jogress. Like needing 3 memory you need to evolve a level 4, then have 3 memory at the start of a turn to even like begin to do a play. It's like really awkward.
Yeah, and Davis Ken and like all this other stuff. It gives you memory, but it's just not enough.
Yeah, but they all require setup, right? Like you need memory. You get memory off of those, but you need to set up those tamers. And then the new option kind of helped with those memory issue, but then it played the opposite piece, so it's just like you're just making your deck very bricky, trying to play all these pieces. Overall, it's neat. I just don't. I don't know. I just don't think it's that good.
No, I don't either. But speaking of also new decks or old decks that got new support, ShineGreymon. As you know, ShineGreymon is the big boogeyman of BT13. However, we are not in BT13. We are in BT12, so we haven't even gotten EX4 yet. And ShineGreymon, I mean, it got Mulligan, which is really nice because previously the deck you kind of needed to high roll a little bit to get what you needed. But you lost Greymon X, which was a huge part.
The collateral damage from the Greymon X.
Yeah, I just don't think this deck does a lot in BT12 because you losing Greymon X just slows you down tremendously.
Yeah, it was like 2/2 with Greymon X.
Yeah, now I think it's like tier 3. I think it's just too slow, and even if you do happen to go fast, the payout's not great.
Okay, so the new Marcus is actually insane. I think
it is. No. New Marcus is crazy. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's just your payoff. Your payoff right now going into, you're just missing too many pieces that you're, Bandai when they created this deck they have a full vision in mind, right? But that full vision is in BT13 when it has 2 more waves of support. This is worse than wave 1 X antibody alpha. So that's kind of where it's at the moment. The old support are way too old, and they're all kind of bad.
Yeah, and so the last card that we are going to place on this tier list is, of course, BT12 Wargreymon. Losing Greymon X was a huge blow to this deck, but you still got a lot of new support. You still got a fantastic new tamer in the form of Tai. You still have Hades Force. Raid is a crazy mechanic, really, and you have really fantastic blocking potential. You hit a 20-21k. I don't know. All of this on paper sounds really fantastic. But to me, this is just best 1.5.
Okay, let me say this. I think it can test Merva.
And that's fine. Like I said, I already thought Merva was teetering on the 1.5 territory. But if I had to pick one of these decks to be in the tier 1 with the other two, I would put my money on Merva over Wargreymon.
No. What I mean is, I think this deck is the deck that Merva may struggle into.
Oh, that's what you mean? Yeah, no, yeah, that's totally fine. Even then, I don't know. It's.
I think, assuming both deck open equal, I think it's Black Wargreymon advantage.
Black Wargreymon?
Alright, Wargreymon advantage. It is Wargreymon that's also black.
Okay, so at full power, Black Wargreymon X didn't have a winning matchup in the Merva Cross. So why do we think BT12 Wargreymon is suddenly having a winning matchup in the Merva Cross?
Because this is, even with the Greymon X hit, this is faster than Black Wargreymon X.
Okay.
It kills a lot faster. I don't know what to tell you. Like going into Meta Greymon X and sometimes doing 3 clicks is like...
I
like, this deck has the ability to kill turn 4. Like, it's not slow. The issue with Black Wargreymon X is like it played this control style, but then like it's very slow to kill. So your opponent has a lot of time to set up. Like it give you give Merva a lot of time to play, like draw pieces and then play a bunch of options and set up Tamer to like kill you. Like this deck, if you don't, you're setting up this big Wargreymon that's like 20k that can block twice, and then it says deal with me now, or I'm probably swinging and killing you next turn, like by checking all your security and going to an Omni, and it has protection from removal. So it has like, even with the hit, I still think this deck is really good. Honestly, like part of me want to put it top 3, but I do understand Merva has a lot of momentum right now, being a really good deck. But I think Wargreymon is like still really good.
No, I completely agree with that. I do think this deck is still very very good. Like don't get me wrong. This is like between this and Merva, both of these decks for me are teetering on that tier 1, tier 1.5 like edge, if you will.
And part of me think like I would not be surprised if this deck end up being like the second best deck in meta in terms of result, or maybe like I can say a world where
if you say best deck, we're gonna start fighting.
Is there a world where English play a fumble?
No.
BLs enough to
No.
like this deck
No,
beat it?
there is no world. There is no world. I'll be frank. I don't think there's a single world where Beelzemon doesn't come out on top.
Because this deck, to be fair, this deck was beating BLs before the hit.
Okay, we're good. It's already been an hour and 16, but on that point, I'm gonna have to. I will be very honest. I think it was very 50-50 back in like JPBT12, and like with the Greymon exit, I don't think it's any longer even close to 50-50. I think BL's just outright fucking.
No, I disagree. I think it was 55-45.
And that's fine.
Favorite.
That's fine. At that point, we're just arguing like small like differences in.
5% is significant. I think it's like 5% Beelzemon favor right now.
James, please. It's been an hour and 17 minutes, man.
I do think it's worth discussion.
And okay, I agree. It is worth the discussion. But I genuinely do think that Beelzemon is just in the favorable driving seat now. In English format, I think the loss of Greymon X, I think, is being understated on how significant it was for that matchup.
I honestly think it's Beelzemon and then like a 3-way tie for second place.
And that's totally fine. Like for all I give a shit, there we go. There we have it. Look, like here. I'll make you happy.
Actually, move those 3 all down to 1.5. No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, look, man. If there was a tier 0 format that wasn't Gabumon and it wasn't DarkKnightmon, this is probably the next one. To be honest with you, so I digress. Yeah, no.
Are we overhyping Beelzemon X?
I might just have PTSD. Who can really say? If Beelzemon doesn't perform, then like I've just lost faith in like humanity or something like that. I don't know. I digress. Maybe somebody comes up with an answer to beat Beelzemon X. I don't know what it would be. Okay, let me rephrase that. Comes up with an answer to Beelzemon X that doesn't get absolutely washed by the rest of the format. Okay, let's make that clear. Because otherwise, DarkKnightmon is the answer to that question, and like, no. But yeah, so like, I don't know. I think this is fine the way it is. I'm really like Wargreymon and Merva are very much so both on like that teetering edge. Like to me, they very well could just be like both 1.5, and I wouldn't bat an eyelash.
Yeah. So now, for the end of the video, move Gallant to the top of tier 1 and for all the people to skip to the end.
Alright, so Gallant's in tier 3 now, guys. Like, that's super quirky. Yeah, I don't know. Like, this format, it feels so weird, because your deck, you need to be able to beat BLs, or at least do well enough into BLs, but you also need to not get absolutely railed by hunters, and, like, only a few decks can actually accomplish both of those criteria and like not completely sack away their viability. So like I don't know, it's kind of
I think I'll say this. I think the meta is probably more fun than BT11 pre-ban meta.
I mean, I was having fun pre BT11 ban meta, to be honest with you, but
Because you were playing Black Wargreymon.
okay, I played other stuff. I played Ulforce for like 2 months. Like, leave me alone. Okay, don't get on me for this. I was having fun with Ulforce until Melga, the true menace, arrived. But like, whatever, it's fine. Oh, speaking of which, I don't know if I told you, I beat Ulforce at locals playing Melga. That was free.
Yeah, I told you that matchup is
it's
super
so free. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I'm getting tired. It's been an hour and 20 minutes. You guys all have a good time. Bye-bye.
Bye.